Thank you. We now go to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald, and I would ask if I could have 15 seconds of his time.
I yield back to the chairman.
Okay. Mr. Speaker Gingrich, I just have one short question, and it is a yes or no, unlike the other one. In your 2 decades as a member of Congress, did you see members of Congress put bills in of any sort because they were popular and felt strongly within their district, whether or not they were moving anywhere?
Of course.
And that would include things like impeachment, whether they were likely to succeed or not.
They're political symbols, not legislative symbols.
Very good. I thank you. I thank the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Reclaiming my time. Mr. Larkin.
What happens when an unstoppable political force collides with the most powerful unelected institution in America? Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich just dropped some blunt truth about Donald Trump's battle with what he calls a deeply resistant establishment. And trust me, this isn't just about politics. It's about power, control, and the future of democracy. In this video, I'm breaking down Gingrich's powerful testimony, what it reveals about the judiciary, and why Trump's influence continues to shake the foundations of the system. Buckle up, it's going to get real. Let's start with the core of Gingrich's argument. Donald Trump didn't just win an election, he challenged a system that's been in place since the New Deal era of 1933.
Mr. Larkin,
according to
nationwide
Gingrich,
injunctions, they're a relatively new phenomenon, right? Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fair to say nationwide injunctions became more commonplace in the 60s and 70s, and that is because Congress began authorizing general rulemaking by federal agencies, such as passage of Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Act.
Well, there are several factors that led to the late development of it. One is a change in philosophy of what it meant to say that something was unconstitutional. For example, Professor Samuel Bray explained this at length in his article. Traditionally, when a court said something was unconstitutional, it meant the government could not enforce it against you. Over time, courts gradually began to say, no, that means you can't force it against anybody. The problem is that overlooks the role that a district court judge has both horizontally and vertically within the federal system. No one district court judge can bind the appellate court or the Supreme Court. No one district court judge in Maine can bind a district court judge or any judge in Alaska. And so, unfortunately, this practice developed, and we didn't have anybody stepping back and saying, no, wait a minute, are there constitutional, statutory, et cetera, limitations on it? And it has actually hurt both parties, because each party has suffered through this process.
Thank you. Speaker Gingrich, as you mentioned in your testimony, between 2001 and 2023, there were 96 nationwide injunctions issued, of which 64 were granted against President Trump. Well, why do you think the courts have issued nationwide injunctions against President Trump with such frequency? It's kind of a question we're all pondering right now.
You know, one of my favorite books on the law is The Bramble Bush, which is the 1929 introductory lectures at Columbia Law School.
According to Gingrich, that century-old establishment includes career bureaucrats, legacy media, and most importantly, the judiciary. He says the establishment is fighting back hard, and the battlefield, the courts. Gingrich dives into a legal trend most Americans aren't even aware of: nationwide injunctions. These are court rulings from single federal judges that block presidential policies across the entire country. Of the 96 issued since 2001, 64 were against Trump. Gingrich calls this weaponization of the courts, claiming judges, many appointed by Democrats, are overstepping their power. He pulls no punches, saying the courts are the last stronghold of the left, and they're using their legal power to resist an elected president. It's not about justice anymore, Gingrich argues, it's about control. This raises serious questions about the role of unelected judges in a democratic society. If you're into politics, power, and truth that doesn't pull any punches, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We break this stuff down without the fluff, and you don't want to miss what's coming.
Which draws a distinction between the law as it is practiced and the law as it is written. So let's just, at a common sense level, be honest. Donald Trump represents a profound, fundamental shaking up of a very deeply resistant establishment, which can be traced back to Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. You take on a system that's almost 100 years old, the system fights back. The last great bastion of power held by the left is district court judges and their allies on the Supreme Court. And they're behaving as a historian. This is a perfectly natural thing. They're doing everything they can to stop the president, who was elected by millions of Americans. They were elected by no one. But under our system, they have a certain amount of power. Not nearly as much as the modern legal system believes, because the 1958 decision by the Supreme Court, which said we are supreme, is baloney. The Supreme Court is supreme in Article 3. It is not supreme over the whole Constitution. And I think we're now going to face a genuinely important, historic conversation as a country about whether or not unelected judges on a randomized basis, who happen to be 92% Democrat, have the power to stop the elected commander-in-chief on item after item after item. My guess is the American people will say to the legislative branch, you got to be kidding me. And if Justice Roberts wants to cut this off, he should act now, because this is going to get worse, not better.
Gingrich even calls out Chief Justice John Roberts, saying if he doesn't step in soon, this legal overreach will only get worse. The 1958 ruling that crowned the Supreme Court as the ultimate authority, Gingrich calls it baloney. He's pushing for a national conversation about the limits of judicial power and whether America's legal system is becoming its own shadow government. So what do you think? Is Gingrich right? Is Trump a disruptor exposing deep-rooted bias in our legal system? Or is this just politics as usual with a louder megaphone?
It's not better.
Drop your...
Thank you. Mr. Larkin, I'll just finish up with a quick question about forum shopping. It's something that's clearly been happening, and we're used to it at the state level within the judiciary as well as at the federal level. I was wondering if you had a comment about that.
Sure. I mean, the problem is attempted to be avoided by having random assignment. But unfortunately, there are some times when there's only a limited number of judges in a particular district. And as the result, if there's only one, that's who you're going to get. If there are two, you have a 50% chance. And people wind up doing this, not surprisingly, because they think Judge A is going to give them a better likelihood of success. Now, you know, that's bad enough when what you're talking about is a damages action, because that damages action is going to result in a check, perhaps, that goes just to one party. It's different when you're talking about having one judge in any one town enjoying the entirety of the federal government across the nation. That's a much more severe problem, and that's why this is a reasonable effort to cabin that. And, you know, picking favorable judges is a reason why.
Thank you. I'd yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We now recognize the gentlelady from California.
Drop
Ms.
your thoughts
Lofgren.
in the comments. This is a conversation we need to have. And if you found this video insightful, hit that like button so more people see it. Until next time, stay sharp, stay informed, and keep questioning the narrative.